try and get inside the head of Marc Andreessen, one of the biggest and most influential names in Silicon Valley. Now, if you think world-changing tech is built on some grand, perfect plan, think again. We're going to unpack a totally different story, one where success isn't a straight line, but a chaotic, messy, and kind of clumsy stumble upwards.
And this quote right here, this is the whole idea in a nutshell: falling up the stairs. What Andreessen's getting at is that even the most powerful tech companies never really find stable ground. Their entire existence is just one long, constant battle. The second they think they've reached the top, a whole new crisis comes along and threatens to send them tumbling all the way back down. So here's our game plan. First, we'll dig deep into that core idea of falling up the stairs. Then we'll explore just how fragile tech history is by looking at the paths not taken. After that, we'll track how venture capital itself had to evolve, how the industry woke up to politics, and we'll end with a pretty surprising turn towards a new tech patriotism.
All right, let's jump right in. The journey of a truly game-changing company is never, ever a smooth ride-up. It's more like a series of near-death experiences, these brutal existential threats that force them to completely reinvent themselves over and over again. Success isn't about dodging crises. It's about somehow surviving them. A perfect example? Facebook. Right after its IPO in 2012, the stock just tanked. Wall Street was convinced that the huge shift to mobile was going to absolutely kill its ad business. Seriously, it looked like they were toast. But that moment of crisis, that near-death experience, forced them to evolve. And mobile ads? They didn't just save Facebook. They made it more powerful than anyone could have imagined. So this idea of just barely surviving leads us to a pretty wild conclusion. Nothing in tech was destined to happen. The world we live in today wasn't engineered. It's the result of a few tiny little decisions that could have so easily gone the other way. You could say every tech giant is haunted by the ghost of a future that almost happened. Just think about this for a second. Yahoo was this close to buying Facebook for $1 billion. But then the 2008 financial crash happened, Yahoo got nervous and tried to lowball the offer. That one moment of hesitation was all Mark Zuckerberg needed to walk away. A single renegotiation literally changed the course of the entire internet. And of course, we have to talk about the all-timer. Blockbuster had the chance to buy Netflix. They laughed them out of the room. It is the textbook definition of a giant underestimating a disruptor, and it just goes to show how one simple no can unleash a force that brings an entire industry to its knees. And hey, one more for the road. Yahoo also had a shot at buying Google for peanuts. So you see the pattern here? The big takeaway is that while huge trends like the smartphone were probably inevitable, the specific companies that won were not. The tech landscape we know today is incredibly fragile, built on a series of coin flips that landed just right. So if the tech companies themselves were constantly evolving through chaos, what about the venture capital firms that were funding them? Well, they had to change too. The old way of investing just wasn't cutting it anymore for this new breed of startup. You know, for decades, the classic VC model worked just fine. You had generalist partners who could invest in a database company one day and a router company the next. Because at their core, they were all kind of the same. They were just building and selling tools. The business model was similar enough that one smart person could get their head around the whole field. But then, around 2010, everything changed. A new kind of company started popping up, what Andreessen calls a full-stack startup. These companies weren't selling tools to an industry. They were becoming the industry themselves. Think about it. Uber wasn't a tool for taxi companies. It was the taxi company. Airbnb wasn't software for hotels. It was the hotel. All of a sudden, you needed to be a deep expert in transportation or hospitality or even defense to have any clue which startup was going to win. And this massive shift forced Andreessen's own firm, A16Z, to take a hard look in the mirror. They realized that picking the right sector wasn't good enough anymore. You had to pick the single right company. If you picked the right industry but backed the wrong horse, you got zero. So they totally ditched the old generalist model and reorganized into specialized teams for things like biotech, crypto, and so on. Okay, this brings us to the political world. For the longest time, Silicon Valley was basically invisible to Washington, D.C. But as tech's influence exploded, that cozy arrangement ended. It turned into an intense political spotlight, and it forced the industry to draw a brand new line in the sand. I mean, this timeline says it all. The whiplash is incredible.
Social media went from being a dumb toy for posting cat photos to being praised as a tool for democracy during the Arab Spring to then being feared as some kind of evil mind control machine that could rig an election. All of that happened in less than 10 years. The public perception just completely flipped.
And according to Andreessen, the 2016 election was the flashpoint. The left became furious with tech over issues like inequality and Trump's win. At the same time, the right became convinced that the big platforms had a deep-seated liberal bias. So suddenly, tech was caught in this political pincer movement, getting attacked from all sides for completely different reasons. This intense pressure forced them to create a really important distinction: little tech versus big tech. Andreessen's firm knew they couldn't just go to DC and defend tech as a whole, so they created a split. Their argument became, hey, don't confuse us with big tech. We're the ones funding their future competitors. We're on your side. We want to disrupt them too. It was a clever way to find common ground. And that brings us to our final piece of the puzzle, which might just be the most profound cultural shift happening in Silicon Valley right now. It's changing relationship with the US government and the military. You really have to understand there's been a massive generational vibe shift, as Andreessen puts it. Silicon Valley's roots are actually deep in defense work from the Cold War. But the Vietnam War created what he calls a groove shift, a counterculture where working with the military became taboo. And that anti-government feeling pretty much dominated for decades. But that's all changing. Now you have a whole new generation of founders. Think companies like Palantir and Endoral, who are actively and proudly partnering with the government. This new way of thinking is both super pragmatic and, well, patriotic. Andreessen's argument is really straightforward. First, the government is a huge customer, so it's just good business. And second, these national security missions actually matter for the country. It's this return to an older idea that building things for America is a noble cause. So all of this leaves us with one big, fascinating question. For decades, tech defined itself as the ultimate outsider, the great disruptor. But as it gets more and more tangled up with Washington, with national defense, with the core functions of the state, is its final destiny not to tear everything down, but to become a central part of the system? Is the endgame of all this disruption just total integration?